Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Reclaiming Family Values event. It's 1 o'clock here and some o'clock in all the time zones where we all are, and we are all ready to start. But first, we would like to ask one of our panelists, someone who's already actually unmuted themselves a little bit earlier, Reverend Hugo Cordova-Cuera, to lead us into a short time of prayer for the troubled world around us. Hugo, welcome.
Thank you. Let us pray. We gather today to celebrate and to commune with one another. We bless this virtual space where we will share and enrich each other. We praise the divinity of many names, for we have received their love, companionship, and strength. We honor all that is important in our lives: love, compassion, empathy, and solidarity. We uphold the right to profess and live a faith, or not to have one, and to celebrate that too. We rejoice in the manifold ways that humanity and the creation find meaning and reasons to become. Through the bonds of that diversity and richness, we become one to honor and to respect each other just as we are. Que así sea. Amén. Amén. Ashe. Blessed be.
Thank you very much, Hugo, and thank you for suggesting that we open this space with bringing into our minds and our souls and our hearts the world around us, our siblings, our friends, all those for whom we care, all the troubled regions and places and conflicts and places where there's more suffering than there should ever be. So thank you for reminding us why we are all here. Let me just shortly introduce myself. My name is Misha Cherniak. I'm a Russian person living in Poland. I'm an Orthodox Christian and a gay activist. I'm a board member of the European Forum of LGBT Christian Groups and also a member of GIN. I collaborate with GIN on a regular basis, including the project that brought us all here, that is the project on family and traditional values, where I took part from the Central and Eastern European perspective. And I'm very honored and humbled by the opportunity to moderate today's discussion. A few words about the event, which, as you all know, is titled Reclaiming Family Values. The event is sponsored by Norway and Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and our deep words of gratitude going to Norway for setting the space for this conversation. The event is also co-organized by a set of international non-governmental organizations, the first of which is GIN, Global Interfaith Network for People of All Sexes, Sexual Orientations, Gender Identities and Expressions, based in South Africa. It is joined by IFAD, International Family Equality Day from Switzerland, FREE from Norway, COC Netherlands from the Netherlands, and RFSL from Sweden. Thank you all for putting your minds and hearts together to prepare this event. And the reason for us to come together today is because GIN, Global Interfaith Network, has led a very special global consultation process that concluded in the publication of a report. And I'm happy to invite Simon Petitjean from GIN to say a few words about the process and the document. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you very much, Misha. Is the sound okay? Can you hear me? Yep. Welcome, everyone. And thank you very much for being here today at the beginning of the 48th session of the Human Rights Council. This is a really important side event for us and our partners. It is the result of 4 years of this project that we started in 2017. We starting to work in the space of the UN. We observed how much family, traditional values, and culture were highly politicized, and the source of a lot of polarization, and great attempts from certain states, certain civil society organizations, to promote a very conservative, limited, static definition of what a family is, how community is lived around the world, what traditional values are and what culture is. And as an organization anchored in the Global South, headquartered in South Africa, with members all around the world, we have 450 members around the world, all LGBTI leaders of faith and allies, we felt it was crucial to have their voices and the voices of the communities that they serve heard in this space, to reflect the way they live their lives, the way they interpret their traditions and their religion and their culture, and to bring this into the advocacy space so that we could bring to light the multitude of lives, of realities lived around the world. We developed this project from this observation. So we've carried out 7 regional meetings in Latin America, Southeast Asia, Central and Eastern Europe, Sub-Saharan Africa, the MENA region, the Pacific, and the Caribbean. And in each of these regional meetings, we brought some of our experts around the table to discuss the reality of families, communities, and to discuss inclusive readings of religious texts and traditions and culture. We then worked, you can find some of these details on our website, and we then worked with a consultant on a report to extract from all the expertise that we gathered some key messages, some key advocacy messages, and parallel thematics, so that we could bring all of that into a report, which is rather extensive, but also with some sections that are very advocacy oriented, so that state delegations, our partners in the advocacy space, including RFSL, including IFED, COC, FREE, and others, can feed that into their own advocacy when it comes to family traditions and culture. So we're delighted to be able to launch this report, and we're delighted to be able to listen to some of the experts that were gathered during this process, as well as others. So on that note, I'll finish here, but thank you very, very much. And I'm very much looking forward to this conversation with you all today.
Thank you, Simon, for this introduction. And for those who haven't noticed it yet, in the chat, Angie, the intern from GIN, has put in the link to the document posted on GIN website. Feel free to open, download, share, send to others, etc., etc. It's a very interesting collection of perspectives from really all over the globe, which is not so often met in today's discussions and advocacy work. So really, really interesting tool, but also an enlightening reading. And also in this spirit of the multi-voice polylogue, let's use this Greek word here today, we decided to structure the discussion or the presentations today not as a chain of separate monologues by different persons, but we invited our 6 wonderful speakers today to have this space split into 3 tandems, 3 pairs. So we will invite people by twos, and we'll ask them some common question and that highlights maybe some of the similarities, but also differences from different regions and countries. So it's my pleasure to invite the first tandem, the first pair. It's Reverend Kakai Pamaran from the Philippines, and Right Reverend Dr. Hugo Cordova-Cuera from the Americas to the table. And let me shortly introduce both of them. Reverend Kakai is a pastor, humanist, peace activist, gender justice advocate, and Bible teacher. She currently serves as coordinator of Union Theological Seminary's Field Education Office in Dasmariñas in the Philippines. She has a degree in psychology from Silliman University and a Master of Divinity from UTS. She's completing her coursework for her Master of Theology in New Testament and Historical Jesus Research, and, which is crucial also for today's discussion, she's a convener of the Center for Gender and Sexuality of the Union Theological Seminary. Welcome, Kakai. Thank you for joining. And I'm also pleased to introduce Right Reverend Dr. Hugo Cordova Cuero, who is an associate professor of critical theories and queer theologies at Starr King School, the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, California. He is a bishop at the church called the Ancient Church of the Americas, which is an ecumenical and interreligious denomination, and he is the continental coordinator of the network of queer theologies and pastoral care. And by uniting the two of you into one tandem, my thinking went in the following direction. You both represent the areas, the contexts which are considered to be predominantly Roman Catholic, really strong Roman Catholic contexts, but you're also both members and ministers of churches that are not dominant in those areas. At the same time, despite the similarities of Roman Catholic dominance, the legal frameworks in your countries, in your areas, are very different. While the Philippines are known for its conservatism and patriarchy, Latin America has a rather progressive situation in terms of the legal rights of LGBTQI plus persons, and most of the countries there have equal marriage and non-discrimination legislation in place. So my question to both of you is whether religion in these two similar but diverse contexts, which you represent, is a positive force in your place in terms of respecting human dignity and diversity, or is it a restrictive and discriminating factor? And for example, if there are protections in place on the legal level, does the reality of queer persons and their families follow the legal protections or not? So the floor is yours. Kakai, would you kick us off with your presentation?
Yes, I would. Thank you. Thank you for that question. Religious and religious consciousness and religion is indeed a force in my country. It's a very strong force, one comparable to the super typhoons or that frequent our country, and as sure as gravity and sunrise. And certainly human rights and human dignity are, in fact, religious themes. But all these get filtered through a cheesecloth, if I may, of conservative frameworks and ways of thinking that get funneled into the consciousness of the masses. In many ways, our religious consciousness, and I do not speak only of the majority Roman Catholic, pegged at 80% of our population, but also the rest of the other organized religions and new religious movements. It is still largely narrow, heterosexist, patriarchal, colonial, but it is very well put. Like, if you are not critical, and most of us are not critical, and if you are not in those key affected populations, and many of us are not in those key affected populations, you'll just roll with it and even celebrate it. For instance, it is very hard to perceive progressive legislations here, like marriage equality or SOGI equality, or the Human Rights Bill for that matter. All of those are still bills. Marriage equality is not even a thought yet in my country. I remember the House deliberations of the Reproductive Health Bill some time ago, and we had congressmen reciting the Apostles' Creed in the session hall. They did manage to pass a watered-down version into law. And more to the point, and I am sure some of us in this room know this, there are only two places in the world where divorce is outlawed: the Vatican and the Republic of the Philippines. Hugo and I share similar themes in our Christian history. This year, 2021, marks the 500th year of Magellan's arrival on the shores of our archipelago. Magellan died on those shores too. A Bagani by the name of Datu Lapu-Lapu killed him in battle. We are the only country in this region, I believe, with that kind of Christian history. So the post-colonial discourse, and I am affirming Misha's theory here, the post-colonial discourse in the Philippines and in the Latin Americas, we dovetail beautifully into each other. Our experiences are very, very similar, more similar, in fact, than that of our immediate Southeast Asian neighbors. And this is also perhaps why, despite of our differences in legal protections and legislations, we share the same cultural traits with the peoples of the Latin Americas in terms of religiosity, down to even how we cook and enjoy our food. Our resistance writings also follow a similar trajectory. The Latin Americas has liberation theology, as we know, while we have the theology of struggle. They come in many forms and have birthed many theologies and articulations, including, for instance, the Babaylan and feminist theologies. These map a similar thread of colonization, persecution, and finding meaning in the Christ who was crucified with the people and the multiplicities of these Christologies. My personal awakening occurred whilst in seminary formation. In the study of scripture and theologies, dogmatics, and then systematics, we were brought, and I shift my language now because theological journeys are almost always done with community. We were brought into the paradigm of the constructive. The Babaylan, for instance, is a title for the village shaman or a spiritual leader in our pre-colonial past. The Babaylan is almost always a woman. Well, in fact, always a woman in many studies. If one is chosen to be Babaylan, even if the child is born male, this child will be raised as a woman by the older Babaylans in the village. And this is why our feminist theological articulations, at least in my training here in Union, begin there. So to answer your question, Misha, on whether there are ways that our faith traditions and cultural narratives can support the drive toward equality and inclusion, the answer is still yes, in spite of. Because communities, Christian communities like the communities that I belong to, will always continue to struggle and will always continue to find alliances and solidarity efforts among other struggling sectors of society, for instance, the peasant farmers, the laborers, the indigenous peoples. For example, even without legal protection, I have been conducting holy unions for same-sex couples since I was a student in seminary. That was almost a decade ago now. And there are a handful of us who do this openly. I personally know pastors who had solemnized unions of same-sex couples, baptized children of queer families, blessed their homes and their businesses, knowing that if their churches ever found out, they could get their ordinations revoked. In fact, the same laws, or the lack of such, the same laws that protect the ruling religious elites is the same premise for the exercise of these rituals that affirm the love of people, regardless of their biological sex or sexual orientation or gender identity. Do we need proper legislations in place? Yes, we do. And this is why I am here, because I am appealing to whoever who will listen, that if they could help us in any way, that would be just awesome. And as help is trickling in, the communities will continue to struggle, they will continue to resist, and they will continue to endure. Queer families will continue to find meaning and their place in communities that will keep them safe, with or without the protection of the state, which has failed them at every turn. But we are still here, the communities, the churches, the organizations represented here in this room, and we continue to struggle and actively hope for the fullness of life for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kakai, for this inspiration and for pledging that you will continue with or without protection. But of course,
definitely.
we would like the protection to be there. Hugo, the floor is yours. The mic is yours and the yellow box is yours. Please, yes, thank you for starting sharing. Welcome. We can see the window with your presentation, but not in the presentation mode, and we cannot hear you, Hugo. Hugo, are you able to unmute yourself? You would probably need to get access to the window of Zoom, not with the settings, but with,
Hello.
oh, Exactly.
I'm
Perfect.
very sorry about that technical glitch. I'm very, very
No.
sorry. Thank you so much for this. I'm very, very sorry. Thank you for your patience. My presentation about Latin America aims to also answer the question, but also to tell some of the situations happening in Latin America. First of all, I would like to start highlighting that the LGBTIQ plus rights and the human rights situations in Latin America continues to be worrisome. The violation of human rights of LGBTIQ plus people is marked by what I call technologies of othering, for example, in the form of police edicts, arbitrary detentions, coveted expulsion from public places, and naturalized LGBTIQ plus phobic remarks by politicians and mass media, among others, which has already been highlighted by the International Human Rights Commission in 2018 report. At the same time, the enactment of laws does not necessarily mean neither the change of societal attitudes nor the government's commitment to upholding those decisions under the pressure of anti-rights lobbies. So the situations continue to be something that we need to continue working. And there are much more organizations in the last decade by anti-right movements against the specific rights of LGBTIQ plus people. In terms of the families, the concept of the nuclear cis heteronormative family has been a political weapon of exclusion and marginalization for other families in the region, especially since its inception under colonial powers, which was detrimental for the peoples that already inhabited the continent, because in some of the nations that were organized prior to the arrival of the colonizers, the way that they organized families, they saw sexuality, or they saw coupleships of families was completely different from this performance of European views. In consonance with the political system, hegemonic sectors of Christianity have deepened the exclusionary and violent use of that particular family model as a dogmatic weapon. And this was done also by colonialism. In fact, European Roman Catholic priests, Roman Catholic nuns, Protestant ministers, Protestant missionaries took that cis heteronormative nuclear family notion and imported to Latin America as a divine ordained model, and that really overturned all other models of family. Also, there is a societal expectation of a much deeper constructural relationship with family members, which in turn coerces and conditions the lives of LGBTIQ plus people and their chosen family models. Leaving the family house, it could be traumatic. Organizing your own household with a family that is different from the nuclear cis heteronormative family also can be traumatic. There is coercion from families. We feed you, we clothe you, we give you shelter, we demand from you that you obey us. You should continue the name of the family, you should marry, you have sons and daughters because this is your mandate. So all those situations make it very difficult for people to just say, I'm gonna move on and have my own family, because they feel that they are obliged to the families to fulfill those expectations. In the last 20 years, we have some changes in Latin America. For example, equal marriage is already a nationwide law in Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Uruguay, and 22 out of the 32 federative states of Mexico. Yet same-sex marriages in churches do not get the same recognition as cis heterosexual Roman Catholic ones. For example, when we did the same-sex weddings with the immigrants, the refugees from Central America in Tijuana in Mexico back in 2019, the media and other churches portray them as political performances when all the ministers present during the weddings, we were officially ministers in our churches, and also those from the United States were allowed by the United States government to perform legal marriage. Yet, despite all the laws, those marriages are not recognized as equals. Gender identity law are already present in Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Cuba, Uruguay, and 6, out of the 32 federative states of Mexico. Yet only some inclusive churches recognize, baptize, and even ordain transgender or intersex ministers. Most of the established Christian churches do not recognize people from sexual diversity and gender diversity in their ministry. Therefore, laws must require further actions to educate and to create awareness in the social, political, and cultural spheres, especially with the legal recognitions of new families, such as, for example, triples in Colombia, that is a family composed of 3 people. So this is something that needs to be educated by intentionally by the government and also by the religious structures. The cultural Masberia hegemony in Latin America must stop exclusively visibilizing the Roman Catholic Church as the representative of Christianity, which includes other churches. And states should guarantee freedom of religion and equality of religion. In many countries, the Roman Catholic Church takes even governmental status, like in Argentina. So other churches have to drop the term Catholic from their name, because even when you are free to practice your religion, you are not free in equality to practice your religion. So this hegemony of the Roman Catholic Church is not paired with the numbers and with the situation in Latin America. For example, in Argentina, we have 44 millions of people. Only 28 millions currently recognize themselves as Roman Catholics. But of those 28 millions, only 3 millions actually practice Roman Catholicism as their Christian form of faith. That means that we are talking about less than 10% that takes precedent and decisions over the situations in society. At the same time, right-wing Christian lobbies constitutes one voice within religions, but progressive and LGBTIQ-friendly sectors of Christianity and other religions too should equally be heard, especially in their support for diverse models of family and values. For example, even when Brazil already have the equal marriage law, the Statute of Family, which is a project at the Congress by anti-LGBTIQ religious sectors, seek to overturn the equal marriage law. And that lobby is powerful, and the governments, I'm not sure they are going to uphold their decision. At the same time, we need to dismantle the stereotypes and social outbreaks of violence against LGBTIQ plus individuals and communities. States should protect LGBTIQ plus believers who profess a particular faith within the many religious progressive sectors that support their rights, such as an inclusive communities. Again, these inclusive communities get invisibilized when the only way to portray religion is through the sectors of Roman Catholic Church who are anti-rights, the sectors of evangelical churches who are anti-rights, and the rest of the religions are invisibilized. In Latin America, literally all religions from the world are represented. We have native Latin American religions. We have people who practice faith with Afro-rooted religions. We have people who practice faith born in Asia, apart from the major religious families, which is Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, paganism, Hinduism. So all those religions get invisibilized when the Roman Catholic Church is taken as the only representative, not only of Christianity, but also of religion, and also as the moral compass for what society should be. That is not respecting equality of religion. We have many organizations, apart from churches, that are based on one religion or are interreligious. I represent one organization. GENE is also present, and we are part of GENE. There's other organizations like Otros Cruces and many other organizations who are supportive of LGBTIQ plus rights. They all get invisibilized. When the discussion happens in Congress, not all these people in every country are invited. Only the anti-right sectors are invited because their lobby are more powerful. So in terms of your question about the role of religion in all this, I should say that we need to start dismantling the hegemony of Roman Catholicism by pointing that there are other Catholic churches, independent, ecumenical, interreligious churches that are Catholic, that also stand in the same Catholic tradition in Christianity. There are many Christian churches and religions who are supportive, who have been doing incredible work. For example, in Argentina, during the military dictatorship, the Protestant progressive churches were doing sexual education in their communities in Sunday school long before Argentinian government would think about a law for sexual education in the schools. So there is a force that can be important for this, but these need to be visibilized. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hugo, and also for showing the existence of voices that are progressive, that are working actively on the grassroots level, and drawing our attention to the need to visibilize and highlight and promote those solutions and those ideas and those narratives. Thank you very much. That is very important also to remember that the religion is not a monolith, and that one religious organization cannot hijack all religious spaces. Thank you very much for this, for reminding us about that. Now, unfortunately, even though I would like to ask more questions about your two contexts, but I have to move on unless we're all ready to spend the whole day on this Zoom call, which I don't think is the case because we've all had 1.5 years by now of Zooming. My pleasure is now to introduce the second tandem of today. It's Imania Brown from Samoa and Australia, and Dylan Mohammed from the Caribbean, from Guyana. I will say a couple of words about both of you. Josina Imania Brown is a survivor of institutionalized discrimination, spousal gender-based violence, racial profiling, and trans violence, discrimination, and persecution. She lives her truth as a proud Fa'afafine and trans woman of color from Samoa, a human rights defender, and a former corporate in-house counsel. Born, raised, and educated in Samoa, she currently works and lives in Brisbane, Australia, as a single parent with 2 adopted sons. She has over 15 years of volunteer experience in international NGOs, where she is a fierce advocate for LGBTIQ communities with a focus on the intersectionality of Indigenous, trans, interfaith, environment, and economic justice issues. Imania is a former co-chair of GENE and currently also serves as the co-secretary general of ILGA World. Welcome, Imania. And I'm also pleased to welcome Dylan Mohammed, who is the Caribbean representative on the board of GENE. Aged 28, Dylan holds a diploma in theology and Christian ministry from the AOG Bible College in Guyana. Dylan is an air traffic controller by profession, which has always been a dream of mine, and student of the University of Guyana, pursuing a bachelor's degree in English linguistics. As an active member of the Society Against Sexual Orientation Discrimination and a lay pastor of the Hope of Christ United Anglo-Catholic Church, which is Guyana's first LGBTQ affirming church, Dylan has been on the forefront of advocating for LGBTQ rights, particularly engaging churches and parachurch organizations. Dylan is a lover of nature and animals, and also an astute advocate for the environment and Indigenous peoples, religions, and languages. His greatest dream is to one day see a world where there's peace, love, and equality for all of humanity. Well, don't we all want that? And I think that's the reason why we're here. So coming now to the two of you with my question, is after having read the report that we are highlighting today in our conversation, a report from the regional conversations and consultations hosted by Jin, I saw that in the key messages of that report from quite a few regions, there was a strong accent on the effect of colonization. And we are looking precisely at also deconstructing such consequences and looking deeper into what has been at the level of local traditional values and narratives that are open to equality and diversity. So maybe you could share, Dylan and Emania, a bit on how Christianity imposed on the region several centuries ago is acting now. Are the religion's voices there now positive? Is there a positive narrative? Or religion is a clobber and a barrier to full equality and diversity? Are religious voices raised only against, or there are religious voices in favor? Please share about your situation in your regions. And I don't know who wants to start, Dylan or Emania.
I bow to Dylan. Dylan, you may, yeah.
Dylan, please unmute yourselves, and I think you're also going to share your screen, right?
Yes. Большое спасибо, Misha. Thank you very much.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you.
And just let me share my screen. All right, a bit of technical difficulty here. Not sure why.
Do you want me to go? There you go.
All right.
That's not the screen, probably. Yes, that is the one.
Yes. Thank you guys for your patience. Reclaiming family and traditional values in the Caribbean, the LGBTQI context. Why does this matter? So I begin with a case of violation right in my own country, Guyana. So we recently had young homosexual boyfriends evicted from their homes in Guyana in May of this year. And of course, in a pandemic, because we're still in the COVID pandemic, because of their relationship and desire to get married and raise a family together. In Guyana, we don't yet have laws that include anything other than cis heteronormative marriage. And so anything else is frowned upon. The families of these young men had no issues with their sexual orientation. Of course, there are many families that still have issues with the sexual orientation of their queer children. However, in this particular case, the sexual orientation was not an issue as long as they remained single and had no intention of starting a queer family. So we do recognize that the idea of anything outside of the cis heteronormative family is indeed an issue, a key issue. The cause of this problem, the colonial influence of 17th century Christianity still lives on in the Caribbean, and not just through the religion itself, but the laws that still define what constitutes a family and heterosexual, heteronormative couples only. Messianic Judaism also contributes to this, but the community is very small within the Caribbean. So in the political sphere, there isn't much of a voice from the Jewish community, but the majority of it is fundamentalist right-wing Christians. Islam within the Caribbean, also Abrahamic, is also a contributing factor, although to a lesser extent. So some countries do not have a Muslim community, but some do, especially where there is a presence of Indo-Caribbean community. Like in Guyana and in Trinidad, there is an Indo-Caribbean Muslim community. that also tends to, through the religious organizations, contribute to the opposition of anything outside of the cis-heteronormative family. Non-Abrahamic religions at the fundamentalist level, so we have Hinduism, we have Buddhism, we have the indigenous religions. However, some of these religions, when taken to a fundamentalist level, also carry a patriarchal element, especially those influenced by Yamna or Indo-European, if we know history, we would understand, culture that discourages queer families. The complexity of this problem, it is impossible to address the issue of family diversity on the basis of sexual orientation and plurality without addressing other factors that affect the intersectionality of couples within the Caribbean. So in the Caribbean, we have almost every region of the world represented. We have indigenous persons, we have Afro-Caribbeans, we have Indo-Caribbeans, we have European Caribbeans, Chinese, Indonesians, Syrians, Arabs, Jews, etc. Within the Caribbean, culture, race, social class, economic factors, and profession. In some of the cultures, especially the indigenous cultures, queer families are actually allowed. However, much of this has to be done in secret, and mostly because indigenous communities are within the Amazon interior, especially in Guyana, and even in some of the islands, they are in remote areas. It's a bit easier for them to continue the practices of having queer families. However, it's not visible to society because of the colonial laws, as well as some African religions and some Hindu sects also encourage queer marriages. The Santeria religion, which is also part of the Ifa faith from Africa, and the Voodoo religion as well. And of course, there are some Hindu priests that do blessings on queer marriages. Education is absolutely important if the changing of laws is going to be effective in maintaining the acceptance of family diversity. So we've had the problem of education in the Caribbean because much of the education is still based on our colonial laws, and there hasn't been much of an upgrade to our education system. And so persons are still educated along the lines of cis heteronormative family. There has been some effort by organizations like SACID and J-Flag and others within the Caribbean, Carry Flag, that would have gone into schools to do sessions on diversity, and this would have included some education on family. However, this is not part of the main education system within the Caribbean. Neocolonial right-wing media from the global north continues to feed most Christians with the idea that the normal family is under threat of becoming extinct if other types of families are included. And so we still have the majority, not all, we do have some Christian voices that are for the LGBTIQ community. And in contrast to Latin America and the Philippines, we actually have the Roman Catholic and more traditional churches, Anglo-Catholic, Anglican, and the Presbyterian Church, on the side of LGBTQ rights as against the evangelical and more Protestant churches who are very fundamentalist and against any form of LGBTIQ rights. And these are the churches that have more say in the political sphere as against the more traditional churches. How do we solve this? Education. First, we as leaders of the people must understand the reality of all of the people we lead, including minorities. And this understanding must be transferred to the majority through education. So again, I want to emphasize that education is lacking very badly in the Caribbean when it comes to LGBTQI rights and family. Secondly, legal reform and maintenance. The colonial laws in the Caribbean are far overdue for reform, and although not enforced in most cases, do allow for the persecution and sometimes even murder of LGBTQI families. This must be maintained through ongoing education. So the reform and the maintenance must happen through education. And lastly, religious reform and the maintenance of separation of church and state. While religious organizations are entitled to their beliefs, where these beliefs violate the human rights of others, they cannot be applied beyond the boundaries of the religious organization's membership. And so we've had in the Caribbean the large influence of the fundamentalist church, and in where there's the existence of Islam as well, fundamentalist Islam, and even other fundamentalist forms of religion, other religions, largely affecting the decisions of the government on LGBTQI issues and family. Closing remarks. The love of a family is an absolute need and the right of every human. The traditions and values of family do not depend on gender, sexual orientation, number, culture, in reference to polygamy, culture, race, religious beliefs, social class, economic status, or mother tongue of the partners involved. They depend on the character, genuine love, and care in the hearts of those partners. And finally, love and light to everyone.
Thank you very much, Dylan, for sharing the local perspective and examples and very concrete stories as well, and also reminding us of the role of education, and also importantly, in the context of hegemony of the Roman Catholic Church in some other region, drawing our attention to the fact that even the Roman Catholic Church is also acting positively in some other places. Thank you for all this diversity. Imania, please unmute yourself and bring it on.
Okay, so there's a couple of things that I wanted to talk about very, very quickly first. There is a saying, something that we always forget in our gatherings. We know it's there, but I think in times like these, we need reminding. There's a saying in Christianity, in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 18, verse 20, that says, "For where 2 or 3 of you are gathered together as my followers, I am among them. And I say, welcome to the Son of Man, Jesus Christos. We are honored to have you here with us, your LGBTI followers of faith here in this HRC side event. Thank you for being here, and we hope you enjoy the ride." This is a very important event also. Second thing is, this is a very important event for all of LGBTI people of faith. And I want to open with this small nugget of wisdom that some of you may know, some of you may not know. We all know about Stonewall. It is the hallmark of our history as a movement, right? But did you know there was a relatively unknown event that happened in 1968, a year before Stonewall, where Troy Perry, he was an Assemblies of God minister. He was defrocked or removed from his position as a minister. He gathered 12 people in his Los Angeles lounge room and had the first meeting of the Metropolitan Community Church, the MCC. Troy was one of the first ones. He was a person of faith, and he dared to believe in a free world, right, way before Stonewall. So I just wanted to keep that in perspective for all of you, for all of us here who are people of faith, who are LGBTI people of faith. Now I want to talk about the questions that Misha, our moderator, has asked, how Christianity imposed on the region several centuries ago is acting now. In the Pacific, there are no major changes. We worship different gods then. We had the god of the fish, the god of the trees, the god of the winds, the god of the rains, etc. But now we worship different gods, in different faiths. As reported in our dialogue that we had before Christianity, there were so many words referring to non-binary people in Melanesian and Polynesian languages. And all those words have not been shared by church and schools. So there is an erasure of sorts in that culture. And so in some countries, yes, we now have different faiths. We have Presbyterian LMS, we have Catholics, we have Methodists, we have Mormons, we have Seventh-day Adventists and others, But so you know, pre-colonialism and up until now, the meaning of family has never been nuclear. We have never believed in the Pacific. We've never believed in the concepts of one father, one mother, and one child, right? Or two children. For us, it's always been extended. It's always been multi-parental figures, multi-siblings. You know, my uncle is my father, my auntie is my mother, my cousins are my brothers and sisters. Now, Aina is your family in a traditional sense, and your village, your whole village is your community, is your extended family. And we call them different names. Aina, Whanau, you know, Kopu, mob, family, you know, so many other names in the Pacific. The meaning of traditional values is embedded in our culture. We have different names for these in the Pacific. In Samoa, it's called Samoa. Traditional values in Samoa is Samoa, the Samoan way. It is true in our culture, very true. And you know this in Pacific culture, it takes a village to raise a boy. That's so true, because for us in the Pacific, more than one person raises a child. Are there positive religious narratives, or is it only being used as clobber passages to harm and discriminate and oppress LGBTI people? In the Pacific, religious narratives are by and large very positive. They're very familial. LGBTIQ people prepare, or they help prepare places of worship. Fa'afafine and Fatama in my own country in Samoa, they are part of youth groups, they are Sunday school teachers, they are part of choirs, they are welcomed by the local villages and churches. We don't just, the thing that we don't talk about is we just don't talk about certain topics, two of them. One is marriage equality, for example, and the other one is the decriminalization of homosexuality. But by and large, we are accepted because of the balance, right, of culture, rule of law, and religion. So it's largely in a positive way. And I'll backtrack a little bit. There are three pillars in Samoan or Polynesian society. There is the culture, right, that governs our daily lives and what we do, and you know, who eats first, who eats second, who gets the head of the fish and who gets the tail of the fish, etc. There is religion, which is mostly imported, right? Christianity imported by missionaries. And there is the rule of law. Those three pillars exist to govern the lives, the daily lives of people in the Pacific. They all play a part in keeping society in balance, right? Human rights, though a foreign concept in the Pacific, because you know, human rights are intrinsically very selfish by nature. Human rights are about the human being, the me, the id, the I, me and my rights, you know. Most Pacific nations are subsistence economies. We work, we plant, we hunt, we eat, we pray, and we do all these things together collectively. So the notion of community rights parlays a more prominent role than human rights in these subsistence economies. It's not to say that it does not have a place. Of course, human rights has a place in our lives. It's just that human rights principles are known by other names. For example, in Samoa, the notion of mutual respect, we have a word for it, it's called whawhewhai. The notion of love, we call it alofa. The notion of whipuipuyai, or the notion of mutual protection, we call it whipuipuyai. So all these human rights concepts have names in our culture. We've had names for it for years, right? It's been a part of our lives, so it's nothing new to us. Religion has enhanced that mutuality in my own country. I can speak about my own country in Samoa. It has brought structure and useful interventions in our culture, right? Now, are religious voices raised only against LGBTI and, you know, rights or in favor? There is no shift. It has been like this since 1830 when John Williams arrived in Samoa as an LMS missionary, in support always of LGBTI because of the intervention of culture, except for discussions of marriage equality and decriminalization. So those are the two subjects that we do not talk about in Samoa, but we do, but we need to do it the right way. So from our seminar that we had, that's discussed in the report, the very strong messages came through from the Pacific, right? It is fundamental to look at the long-term history of the different cultures in the Pacific context and their families, forms before colonization, and accept these and reinforce these. Very important. Culture and tradition support a wide diversity in family structures. We need to learn it, we need to live it, we need to love it, and we need to live with it, right? It's not just one idea of a nuclear family. There are many, many family structures in the Pacific, and I'm sure in other regions of the world. The model of Pacific families, of the Pacific culture, is based on community, and I've said this before, which is more important than biological relationships. Blood, filial relationships are, for us, is not as important as community, helping each other and being there for each other, right? Has always been a central point to the social relations in the Pacific. Language for us is central to the lives of all human beings and is an important element in the whole construction of family traditional values. And you find this in Global South countries, because embedded in language is a diverse understanding, right, that has been passed down from generation to generation of what a family is. And it is important, lastly, it is important to value indigenous cultures and expose the restrictive colonial definition of family, which is why we are having these events. Now, the last question that our moderator asked is, looking into the future, are there ways in your context that your faith traditions and cultural narratives can support the drive towards equality and inclusion? Sure. But it needs to be done and led by local activists, not overseas activists. We need to talk about the do no harm principle, because leading from overseas harms people on the ground, right? We need to provide funding. We need to open up networks. We need to talk about technical assistance given to local NGOs, but it must be driven locally. Samoan Pacific nations will always, always respect the trinity of culture, religion, and the rule of law. But what we need is to make sure that these are not shaped or bent in the favor of one group in the community. But we will use the rule of law and culture to pull back religion in order to advance our rights as Fa'afafine and Fatama and Samoa and other identities in the Pacific. How do we do that? We do intersectional engagement, right? Not just talk about our LGBTI issues and fight for our LGBTI inclusion, but fight for the rights of others so that they become they join our fight, right? Once mothers join a LGBTI group, everybody makes way for the mothers. You should know that, in Global South countries, they should know that. Do not harm, the principle of do no harm, right? Let local activists tell us what they need, not us overseas telling them what we think they need. No, let them tell it to us, right? Use the local narratives and stories that are rich and embedded in these cultures, not international mechanisms in our advocacy. Tell our own stories in our own words, not just in panels and side events, but in film, in art, in writings, in essays. Remember, religious persecution of LGBTIQ will always and often lead to things such as potential and real suicidality, right? Mental health issues, self-destructive behaviors from the rejection and the failure and the shame, right? Obsessive behaviors and addictions, and HIV and STI infection from lack of access to safe education. This must be done. Like, we need to do this. We need to continue to do this. And on that note, I wish everybody a great event. And those are my interventions from the Pacific.
Thank you so much, Imania, and just so many important things to take down and take out of this conversation. The last part of your conversation reminded me that in our Eastern and Central European dialogue, we had one activist from St. Petersburg sharing results of a survey that was done among the general LGBTI population about the mental health state and suicidality and all other aspects of it. And it did show that the religious upbringing, oppressive religious upbringing, led to significant rise in the figures of suicidality and mental health issues, which is an extremely saddening result of a report, because it shows that a religion that could be a source and a source of hope and strength becomes also a factor that actually brings people closer to death than to life. So I think thank you very much for this reminder and for all your energy put into and your heart put into your work in the Pacific region. Now I'm really forced to go on to our third tandem, which is the tandem from the continent of Africa, but not only. We're having Benny and Umaima from two different subregions. Let me introduce. Benny Odonga is a transgender non-conforming person, human rights defender, one of Flambe alumni in 2017, and a social worker by profession. Benny is one of the International Family Equality Day co-presidents, and they're also the founder and director of Coast Women for Women, CWW, the organization that advocates for family diversity. Benny is a parent with a beautiful family, a spiritual person, and a motivator. Welcome, Benny. And Umayma Dermoumi is a Moroccan gender expert, currently living in Paris and working with Frida, the Young Feminist Fund, as a program associate in the Southwest Asian and North African, so SWANA region. They had worked within and alongside many feminist and LGBTQIA plus movements in Morocco, Lebanon, and France, and is one of the co-initiators of Nasawiyat, a gender non-conforming and women-centered NGO in Morocco working on the LGBTIQ plus rights. So, dear Umayma and Benny, I'm coming you with a question also with a little bit philosophical maybe background or line of thought. You represent Africa with its enormously vast diversity and history, and I'm thinking of the role of time and the changes happening over time, because thinking of Umayma, your context, MENA has undergone serious transformations in the 10 years since the start of Arab Spring. And the question of mine is, has this been a fresh wind of change for human rights and diversity in the region, or have the role of fundamentalism risen and, for example, the screws for the queer persons have been only tightened? Has the situation become more open for progress and change or less? And Benny, we all know in theory, at least, some basic knowledge that we have, how diverse and affirming for queer ways were different indigenous African cultures, similar to what Emmanuel shared in the previous presentation, before the colonization. Now, after all this time, with the changes happening in your region, has this transformation, has this change been for the better or for not? Are diverse queer families being recognized in your region today? And all of this, of course, also from the religion angle. So please, Benny or Umayma, who wants to start?
I can start if Benny doesn't. I mean, I'm open. Okay, so hi everyone. First of all, thank you for inviting me to this wonderful event. I'm super happy and honored to be part of the panelists today. Well, the region that I represent is really a big region with all the diversities and all the specificities that we are living. It's also one of the regions that we have a big crisis of identities and crisis linked to all what happened those 20 last years, especially after what happened in 9/11, and we are one of the regions that are the most touched by this event. So to just before answering your question, just a clarification, I will use the word queer to talk about the LGBTQ plus community and the gender non-conforming persons, because it's a word that for me represents the most what we have in the region. So to answer your question, what is happening today? We are in 2021, and it's exactly 10 years after what we called the Arab Spring. The Arab Spring, it was like a series of lots of revolutions in many countries. And after those social movements and revolutions, we saw that there were a rise of a lot of political Islamist parties in many countries, in Egypt, in Tunisia, in Morocco. We have also the case of Syria, that is another extremist case. I mean, we saw that after that revolution, those revolutions, lots of the population asked for, voted for Islamist parties. And we saw that they did a lot of things, lots of changes happened in those 10 years. But then today, we saw that things are changing. Those political Islamist parties are no longer in power after those 10 years in the governments and presidency of the regions. We saw even, for example, in Saudi Arabia, which is the cradle of Wahhabism. Wahhabism is one of the extremist branch of Islam. They did lots of liberal reforms, and that's, I think, considered as revolutionary. We see also in Morocco, last week we had elections, and during those elections, we saw that after 10 years, the political party has just 12 places in the parliament, which is really, really a big change. The same in Tunisia, and in other. And it was the same also in Egypt, but in Egypt we had this in 2014. But then in the meantime, what is happening is that those political parties are no longer in the power, but we have then liberal reforms. We have then we have then lots of economical changes. Today, for example, in Lebanon, there is a big economical crisis, and this crisis is touching lots of people, especially the more margins. Margins like queer people today. So this is just an introduction to put you in the situation of what is happening in the region today. And just to point out also that those political changes and economic changes bring also social changes. We see those changes in the new model of family that is imposed by the new economic model and the emergence of middle class in the past 20 years. All what have been said till now in this panel are really related a lot, especially to Imania and what also Dylan said. It's really the same in our region. And this is something that is impacted by the colonization. So today we see the emergence of middle class and we see the emergence of new model of families that impose a new modern composition of the family, which is a woman, a man, and children. So parents, children, and yeah. And this is the economic system does not allow for any other form of family. Family models were different before, even if it was patriarchal families, but we have a lot of women, and we have uncles, grandparents, children, and everyone was into raising children and living in one big house. Things that not exist anymore today, or really in some places. And also at that time, what I see that there were a bit more tolerance and more opening about different kind of gender diversity and sexual diversity. I can again give just an example about something that is in our tradition in Morocco, it's a kind of festival that is a regional festival that is each year, which can sometimes be religious and also commercial activities and happen in rural places. It's spiritual festival. In that festival, for example, it was like a place for all the queer people in Morocco to go there each year, to light candles, to go and spend some time with a whole other queer people. This kind of festival were in time protected by the authorities. Today, and not from Islamist parties, they are forbidden. And we see that there are more control over those practices. There are more control over this kind of events. And we don't have this anymore in our society. So today, when we go back to our tradition and we go back to our spirituality and religion as Muslim in the region, we see that there were a lot more of tolerance, lots more of diversity, and lots more of acceptance of other models of families. However, today, even if we see that there is lots of control and lots of police, state police, we see that there are some resistance, and those resistance are made despite countries that live in alternative forms of families. Like, for example, we see that there are a lot of groups of what we call chosen families, where, for example, when a trans person or a queer person is found in the streets because their biological parents just kick them out, they can find other queer family that can welcome them in a commune, in a queer community, and they can create together a common queer homes. On the other hand, we see also that we see in that some rich people can also live in a total freedom when they can have a modern queer couple life and can adopt children. And all this is really known by the authorities and known by the system. But then all what they ask from them is not to be made public. So rich people are protected because they are rich in a way.
I'm sorry, just to remind you, wrapping up, 1 minute, please.
Yeah. All of these changes may lead to many individual freedoms, but will certainly not solve the fundamental problems of the queer community in the region, which are dignified home, food, and work, and living in dignity. All these changes do not take into consideration the anger of the street and the population, and I am afraid that it will only create clashes between the populations. We are still considered as a queer community, as the enemy that comes from the West and wants to destroy the social cohesion. So today, my recommendations and what has to be done today is work a lot about education. Educate people about sexual and gender diversity, but also to recall our traditions and our religious and spiritual values of tolerance. Our society have been living for more than 20 years in a crucial identity crisis that leads to many forms of violence against the most precarious and especially queer people. The creation of alternative media and making them visible is becoming more and more important. Finally, it is very important to listen and think about solutions with activists who work in the grassroots and who know the realities and what can be done much more than any other person. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Umaima. And I'm really sad that that there is a problem for the festivals, because I'd really love to attend that festival. It sounded beautiful when you described it. And thank you for sharing your perspective and experience. Benny, your time is now. Please take the mic.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. And I'm so glad to be here, especially sharing about family, because I'm so passionate about family. To start with, what I want to say is that whether during colonial period or now, family is a fundamental unit in everyone's life. Be it a family where we're born with blood and family name, or be it a family where we're born with love and commitment. And everybody has a family. That's why we don't have a standard definition of what a family is, because the definition of a family depends within the individual context. What you call a family might not be what I call a family. And we have many types of family, including the rainbow family. But unfortunately, when it comes to the issue of rainbow families, we are not recognized, neither being protected. And this, of course, the rainbow families to continue experiencing a lot of challenges, and these include stigma, discrimination, and violence. And this is because as a result of religious leaders, our traditional culture, among others. The religious leaders have made people believe that there is only one type of a family, which is only comprised of father, mother, and children. And when it comes to the other family, which is rainbow family, they've made people to be violent against the rainbow family because religious people are the most vocal people when it comes to Africa. And they're also influential. So, but they're the same people who doesn't recognize that we do exist. Instead, they use the Bible to condemn us. And their most favorite Bible scripture is Sodom and Gomorrah. But I've never had any religious leaders talking about, God is love. And God is not homophobic, but instead they want people to realize how sinful we are, and even want people to know that we are the people who will be used as a firewood in heaven to burn other sinners. And it's very sad. And this also goes to even the Muslim religious leaders who every Friday in their Muslims talking about how being a gay is sin, how being a gay is a nature. And these have made, when they're shouting in at the mosque, it makes even our children feel like that their family are not valued, their family are not respected, and their family is full of sin, and which is very sad. And these have made everything only favor the heteronormative family setup. Because even when the education system doesn't recognize that we also have other types of families, especially the rainbow families. Just a sad story, the other day, our daughter came back from school and she was asked to draw a family tree. And it was so sad that she came with the assignment at home and asked us, what can she write? Because at school, they only recognize the normal family, which is father, mother, and children. So in a case, she come back home to us, in a case, what should she write? Because the teacher does not recognize that she's coming from a queer family. And as parents, we were so sad because we didn't know what to tell her on what to write, but we told her, it's your choice, darling. Write what you think is good for you. And it was so sad when the child asked us a question that, why didn't their family being recognized? This have also led to lack of inclusive policies. The policies that are there, there are only policies that favor one type of family and leave the other type of family outside. And these have also made even the legal documents. My partner and I, we all have our own children, but in the documents, there's nowhere my name can appear as the parent of the other child, simply because the government documents, especially in Kenya, doesn't recognize that we do exist. We also have the lack of recognition and protection from the states. Even when we also have many LGBTI families, but the government still doesn't recognize that we do exist because, first of all, as an LGBTI person, I am a illegal person. I'm not, the government is just looking for any reason that they found me in act just to take me behind the bars. So I'm not being recognized. So the government doesn't protect me. And this also makes us go through a lot of stigma and discrimination. These have also caused the LGBTI families to live double lives just to protect their loved ones and their families. And people are suffering from mental health because I can't get a job because of who I am. I'm not recognized because of who I am. And then I have to live a double life. And there is nothing so difficult like living a double life, just to please the society. Today you are a man, tomorrow you are a woman. When you are in your closet, you are a woman. But when you go outside there, you have to be a man. And it's so sad, even when we have the LGBTI organizations in Kenya that are really fighting for the rights, but still the issue of family, especially in Africa, it has been left behind. And even the religious leaders who have been sensitized about the existence of the LGBTI people, it's because the entity was through health. And so these have also left the lesbians and bisexual and queer women out, and because it makes them not fall under the key populations. And simply because they don't suffer from HIV, because it's only HIV that makes the LGBTI organizations being recognized in Kenya. A lot have been said, and what I can say is that with all of us from different countries, we have a lot of similarities. And without wasting more time, I would love to conclude that being a sexual and gender minority does not preclude one's desire to be a parent and have a family. And I believe that there is no African family, there is no heterosexual family, there is no homosexual family, there is no white family, there is no black family. To me and to us, we believe that family is a family, and family is important to everyone. And what I would recommend that we can develop an advocacy tool that can be used for advocacy all over in order to empower people the existence of the queer parenting and queer families. And also different organizations and allies that have come together to continue fighting and also had voice in the voiceless about the queer family. I don't have much to say, but just to say thank you, and may God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Benny. Thank you for this sharing, and also for the very, again, sad and touching story about the child with a family tree that spoke to my heart. Thank you so much. Right now, I know we have a short statement and a question coming from the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We have with us Ms. Harriet Berg, Director for Human Rights, Democracy and Gender Equality at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Oslo. Welcome, Ms. Berg, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak in this important session on this important topic and speak on behalf of Norway. Thank you to Gin and all the organizers and speakers for this very informative and inspiring discussion on how we can address the misrepresentation of traditional family values. Which continues to have a very detrimental impact on the lives of sexual and gender minorities, as we've heard throughout this session. Through our long-term partnership with the Norwegian Association of Gender and Sexuality Diversity, FRI, Norway is supporting the work of Global Interfaith Network. We believe that the approach and the efforts that are made to create safe spaces for people of faith, of all sexes, sexual orientations, gender identities, and expressions, and to develop their capacity to advocate for equality and human rights within their religious and local communities is very important. And the report from the 7 regional seminars on family and traditional values organized by GIN since 2018 is a great value, not only for those of you that have participated and your organizations, but also to the international community as such. The report and the declarations from the seminars are important testimonies to the existence of a rich diversity of family experiences today and historically. And also that diverse sexual orientations, gender identities, and expressions are present in cultures around the world. To respect and protect all human beings' individual rights means that no religious, nor traditional or national values can be used as a basis to violate the human rights of any individual. Norway therefore believes that we have to continue to push for reforms and against discriminative laws and practices, and at the same time foster dialogue and increase knowledge and respect for human rights. I hope, and I think that there's been so many interesting things said, so I will rather end this with a hope that governments, as we are, together with civil society organizations, can use this report to promote better understanding and respect for the rights of sexual and gender minorities, including to counter the politicization of traditional family values. And if there's someone that has some more advice in this respect, how we can use these reports, we are of course very, very interested in hearing that, but I don't know how much more time we have now. So thank you so much, and I wish you all the best for your very important work.
Thank you, Ms. Berg, and thank you to the Norwegian government. And I see Mani is ready to respond with some advice.
Look, thank you, Harriet. A few things. One, now more than ever, we need committed partnerships in furthering our advocacy and diplomacy efforts at the UN level. So thank you to the government of Norway and your friends and states who believe in the same principles as we do and as you do. You are part of the countries I affectionately call the Northern Lights, with Sweden and Iceland and others. You step up, you light up, you put your hands up, and you help create safe spaces for us. You never shy away from helping us in the global South. So from the bottom of my heart, I say this to you, Harriet. We see you, we appreciate you, and we thank you from all the activists who are here on this call and who are here in spirit. Secondly, this is something for you to think about. We need to do an immediate audit of all UN current and existing resolutions for language that has either redefined or seeks to redefine the meaning of family at regional and international events, including within UN spaces. Publish those results, publish them, right? Hold those states accountable, hold them accountable by using the UN treaties and mechanisms. These are flagrant violations of the UN Declaration of Human Rights. Norway and our Northern Lights contingency of countries needs to up the ante. These actions by some states cost lives on the ground. That's the blood on whose hands? Now, you can hold and toe the line for as long as you think we will not go past it and stay behind it. The line of state sovereignty, right? Versus UN member states' collective responsibility. But sooner or later, if you do not draw the line in the sand with the blood of my dead LGBTIQ family, there will be no sand. There will be no LGBTIQ in the world. So please, that's my first suggestion. Secondly, let's talk about the big brown elephants in the room, Harriet. We need funding, not just programmatic funding on a project by project basis. We need capacity building funding in the global South. Asia, Latin America, South America, the MENA region, Sub-Saharan Africa, the Pacific, including indigenous Australians, brother boys and sister girls, and Takatapui from New Zealand. Right? We cannot be your partners and give you the data and for your research, the case studies and the information, and we are just rewarded with a hashtag. We cannot sustain that any longer. We too have families and commitments, and we are facing an enemy in the religious right that is fully armed and funded by evangelical Christian supremacists in the US. We are turning up, Harriet, to a gunfight, with all due respect, with nothing but our words and an olive branch. Furthermore, being a full-time activist affecting change on the ground with $0 to $1,000 per annum, budget will no longer work for us. So please don't just pray for us. Help us, fund us, build our grassroots organizations up to be your strong partners on the ground. We can self-sustain after your initial capacity building grants funding for salaries for our staff, because this is not a fight you do in phases. People come and go, activists come and go, politicians come and go, but the fight needs to continue. So help us. Fourth, work with the development agencies like IMF, the World Bank. Lean on them to not loan money to states with poor anti-LGBTI human rights records. Do not stop their development, but make it contingency to improving the LGBTIQ human rights records. Make that a priority in your work, please. Finally, we are here. We look to you for the light that guides us, Harriet, in these dark times. Whilst we are fighting enemies that will stop at nothing to end us, right? We know you believe in the same principles as us of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We are not fighting for our acceptance. We are fighting for our very lives. And I thank you for your continued support for the government of Norway. And on that note, I say thank you. And here's a massive big hug to you, Harriet, and to your comrades and to everyone that has supported this event. Thank you so much.
I just want to say thank you for those really strong, direct messages. We hear you.
Thank you so much for this exchange, because I think it's also inspiring to see this openness in sharing and in accepting and hearing each other and pushing things forward because of this experience of sharing and meeting. I know we are now at the point of past, and we should be closing right now. But before we do that, I would ask Tony Kruger-Baziba, from Executive Director of CHIN, to maybe close us with a few remarks, summing up the process and today's consultation. Sorry, Tony, I'm sorry, I missed. There was one more comment from Hugo, but Hugo, if you can fit it into 1 minute, if possible, that would be great.
Completely. Two things that I think is important about human rights. First of all, social scientists tell us that in history, past and present, there are more than 200 ways of being family. So it's a violation of human rights to only uphold just one model of human rights that is very recent, emerged in Europe in the last 200 years as the only way of being family, when human history has displayed and still continue to display more than 200 ways. And also, this is a violation of human rights when we only have good intentions, but we don't monitor how the conservative sectors of religions, especially from the Abrahamic religions, hijack the space of other religions. And they are the late comers in this religious party. They are completely very new religions, 2,000 years at the most, when other religions are much longer history. So to uphold the rights of every person to profess a religion implies to dismantle the hegemony of those sectors of Abrahamic religion. So I think these two things are really important to really guarantee the human rights of people.
Thank you, Hugo, for your recommendations. And now, Tony, please conclude us in this meeting.
Thank you, Misha. I think that all of the panelists, and especially Imania and her recommendations, are a really hard act to follow. But what I would like to say is, once again, thank you very much to Norway. Thank you very much, Ms. Berg, for your kind words. We very much appreciate the continued support of the government of Norway and the support of FREE, the Norwegian Sexual and Gender Diversity Organization. We think that the work that we do with states and the relationships that we have with states and the collaborations are really, really important. And I think that after today, it is clear exactly why. And we really hope that we will continue to build these relationships and these collaborations, that they will become stronger than ever. And I must be perfectly honest, I'm fully in agreement with Imania about funding. I think it is critical, not only for us, but also for Global South organizations everywhere, because I think that it is only through strengthening the capacity of Global South organizations to intervene in these spaces, to bring the ideas that have been brought today, to point out the critical idea or the critical concepts around family and the intersection between family and faith and sexual and gender minorities. It's only through that work that we will effectively manage to shift the narratives in the global space, but also especially in Global South spaces around the rights of rainbow families and the rights of sexual and gender minorities particularly in relation to the way that faith is sometimes instrumentalized against people. I think it is only through the lifting up of global South voices that we will be able to win the struggle to shift those narratives. So thank you very
You're muted.
Tony, you muted yourself.
brief. I don't know how that happened. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for all of you who are here. We look forward to further work and future work together.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone. Remember, send me your private messages for the lotto numbers for you, because I'm calling to you from your future. Okay, so send me the message.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
you, Will.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Everyone.
Oh, it was nice missing you all.
Kakai.